Hello. In the last episode, our character arrived in Phandelver and spent his evening and morning selling loot and collecting side quests. He learned that the town is plagued by a plethora of issues, most notably a ruffian band named the Red Brands that terrorizes the place due to lack of any guards. Just as Avestrum finished talking to Daran Edelmath about the map of the area and more tasks to complete for a payout, he was stopped by 4 men wearing red on his way back to the town square. The fight hangs in the air. Ah, you must be the famous Red Brands. Tell me more about your organization and your leader.
Did I stutter? I said, give us your gold and get lost, or we'll make ya.
Very well. Have it, the mage says as he begins, gesturing and speaking the spell, causing the arcane focus on his hand to shimmer. The ruffians might not understand exactly what's about to happen, but they know these are fighting words, so they draw their weapons, and the initiative is rolled. The wizard rolls pretty high, but one of the bandits does so as well, resulting in a tie. In this case, I can have the tied characters and monsters each roll a d20 to determine the order, highest roll going first, but that's merely an optional rule. The DM can decide the order if the tie is between a monster and a player character, and considering the odds and how well it fits with the narration, I decide that the caster goes first. And so he moves 25 feet closer to the group of his enemies and releases a cone of chilling air, invoking the rhymes binding ice to delay his opponents. All of them have the right to the Constitution saving throw, which they take, and succeed, every one of them, even though one was pretty close to failure. That also cuts the potential damage in half, going from 13 to just 6. And next go the thugs. The first runs forth and stabs at his victim with a short sword twice, surprisingly landing only 1 hit. The blade pierces the flesh, dealing 6 damage. The owl goes next. It can't do much to stop the group, but it can always provide some help. And so it does, against the nearest one. Then it retreats back into the air. The next Red Brand makes his move. He flanks his target, gaining an advantage on attacks, but still manages to fail one of them, beginning the thrust too far away from the mark. The other successful strike results in 3 piercing damage. Another ruffian rushes in. He's not yet in a position to benefit from someone else attacking from the other side, but with the number of stabs he's got to his disposal, he doesn't overthink it. Once more, the first strike buries the tip of his weapon into the slender body he aimed at, but that overconfidence seems to be taken advantage of when it comes to the follow-up, which misses. The last bandit assumes the flanking position and throws out 2 jabs with his short swords, where the first hit brings up his hopes, but there is just a sliver of hesitation in his eye as he stops again, seemingly true, but the risk of taking more damage is just too great. The necromancer reacts quickly, with a short word flashing silvery barbs in the face of the attacker, forcing him to take the lower roll and causing a miss. The advantage provided by the spell is bestowed upon himself as his turn arrives. The situation is dire. He's flanked from 2 sides. Disengaging won't let him run away. Not far, not for long. He's heavily wounded. And up this close, no attack would be enough to take anyone down. But he is ready and goes for security through obscurity by casting Fog Cloud around himself. After uttering words of power and plucking the strings of weave with the motions of his hand, the area of his choosing becomes heavily obscured. He can't see anyone next to him, but neither can they, which allows Avestrum to run out of danger without provoking any opportunity attacks and leaving the enemies baffled as to what just happened. "What's going on? Get out of here! Split up!" they shout, trying to evacuate the premises. The first thug runs southwest, quickly encountering a massive boulder and turning to his right to go around. The familiar flies higher up in the air and stands watch, telling its master about anyone coming out of the mist and which way they're going. The next ruffian runs up north and looks around another rock formation. The ruffian number 3, just like all of them, has no idea what's going on. There are stomping noises all over the place, and so he decides to go northeast, leaving the area of the spell in few steps and taking a look and cover another stone outcropping. The last bandit bolts east, but the terrain obscures his vision, and he fails to notice the one he's after. as the NPCs did not know what's happening and where to go. Their directions were determined at random with a D8 roll. It's time for the mage now. His summoned spirit reported the whereabouts of the scattering foes, so he knows to go around his bit of the cover where he'll find a target for Tasha's mind whip. As the incantations are done, a horrible migraine strikes the male, who can't resist it. 7 psychic damage is dealt to him, which isn't enough to finish him off unfortunately, but the additional effects of depriving him of his ability to effectively use his time takes hold. After that mental assault, the wizard retreats back into the obscuring mist, again getting out of sight. The struggle and spellcasting draws some attention to the location he was just at, enabling a thug to move that way to investigate and possibly dish out some trouble. Unfortunately for him, he finds nothing. The summoned spirit continues to survey the area from afar and report on the whereabouts of the troublemakers.
Surround the cloud! Don't get him, get out!
The Red Brand shouts, moving closer to the edge of the magical effect, backing up his colleague in proximity. The next ruffian follows suit, taking a stand north of the fog. The last bandit puts up his defenses, bracing against possible incoming attacks and getting ready to dodge them. The caster takes a few steps out of the cover and attempts to finish his opponent off, performing a gesture and an incantation, which cause chilled wisps of smoky air seep from between his fingers before he points at the wounded person and shoots off a beam of blue-white light, intending to freeze the grunt, but he misses, and the fight is prolonged as he has to return to safety of the heavy obscurement. A thug in the south hears the spell being performed and moves closer to the edge of the mist. As per their plan, the owl swoops down to the most wounded of the group and swipes its talons in an attempt to distract him for his master's upcoming turn. Then it flees back up in the air and continues to pay attention to the enemy movement. The next ruffian saw what just occurred and closes the distance between himself and his pal to stop his foe from popping out, again posing some threat with his proximity. The bandit up north also comes closer to leave very little gap in case their target decides to come up from the other side to use his foul magic to do more harm, and prepares an attack action in case the newcomer shows up in his range. The wounded thug spaces away from his colleague so that their reactions can cover a wider area and readies a counter-strike as well. The wizard is appraised of the events thanks to his eye in the sky, so he emerges from the fog to the southeast, steadies his aim against the boulder and launches another ray of frost, striking the human for 5 cold damage and frosting him over as he collapses on the ground. After the elimination, Avestrum returns into the smoke. The Red Brand at the top of the turn order gives out a grunt of anger and decides to run across the fog to stick together with his brothers in arms. He dares not to stay within the area of the effect, for he knows not where the enemy stands and where to swing. Neither does anyone else from the band. The familiar continues to stay out of range and keep track of the enemy activity. The ruffian gets a new idea. He withdraws back behind a boulder, saying, "Hide!" to the rest, and takes cover there. The next bandit follows suit, running up north to another stone formation. The gang scattering gives the wizard some time to breathe, and so he reaches for his daily power of praying his wounds away, but manages to cure only 4 points of health. Then he takes a few steps to the side to keep the assailants guessing. Just as he came to regroup, the thug, now seemingly left alone again, darts back across the mist in order to take cover behind another giant boulder. The summoned spirit saw that and decides to dive down at him, hissing loudly, a distraction that's sure to give advantage to its master. Afterwards it takes turn to climb in altitude again. The Red Brand northeast drops prone and attempts to hide altogether, with quite an effective roll. Next ruffian does the same after moving a bit further behind the rock, only fares quite a bit worse than his predecessor. The mage now has a target primed for assault, therefore he hurries west until the gangster is well in view and beams him with power of ice again, penetrating his defenses and dealing 6 cold damage and covering him in stiff encumbering frost that lowers his speed by 10 feet, making it too far for the bandit to reach the caster in his turn and strike. However, he can still dash in and inconvenience him with positioning, which he promptly does. In the midst of combat, the animal companion has to roll perception check to be able to glean any clues on the whereabouts of the remaining foes. It fails to spot them, however, so the only thing it can do now is to launch at the iced over swordman and help the master deal with it before taking back to the skies and staying safe outside of the melee range. The spellcasting is a clear sign something is going on, so it seems the gangster's gambit has paid off as they begin to close the distance to cut the caster off from his area of safety.
No! Get him!
The thug yells after getting up and running at the top of his speed. The other red band hears the order and runs around the giant rock, rushing as close as he can to the person in question. The player's character is getting swarmed. If he disengages now, he'll still be facing 3 opponents, but if he hits with the Ray of Frost, he stands a chance of eliminating one of them and clearing the path back to the cloud of fog. If he fails, he risks creating an opportunity for the nearest swordsman to strike at him. He takes the risk, and the blue beam bursts from his hand again, finding its mark. If only he was just a bit further away, the hit would have been critical, but it's not, and the attack deals only 2 damage, failing to eliminate the man. The necromancer doesn't have much health left, but he has to retreat. To this end, he spends his movement going back east, giving a chance for the thug to swing his sword, which he takes, and digs the cold steel deep into Avestrum's body, dealing 7 piercing damage. That wound, just like any other, has a chance of breaking the mage's concentration, so a constitution saving throw needs to be done. With all the fighting and assist provided by his owl, the advantage gained earlier in the encounter could be spent on this roll now, but there is nothing in the rules saying you can postpone such use if there is another beneficial opportunity working for you already during the test. Regardless, the concentration is successful, and the ball of mist on the battlefield remains in place. The worst has already happened, allowing the wizard to enter the fog and lose the chase again for now. The slowed down red brand approaches the edge of the cloud and threatens the squares to his sides. The familiar once again harasses the frosted gangster and moves over the mist beneath again. The other ruffian moves just a bit closer, leaving a bigger gap between himself and his pal, endangering more space with his presence. The remaining bandit runs back south to enable himself to take some cover and begin to secure another side of the field. The human caster scoffs angrily. This battle has been going on for far too long, and seems like some bigger guns will have to be pulled out. He reaches to his pocket for a coin, and with a confident slow stride, flicks it high in the air, while he casts the spell and the signs for Jim's magic missile. The most wounded man is the first target. The disadvantage from proximity and the advantage from help nullify, but the flat roll still results in a hit as the dart of force smashes against the attacker, dealing enough damage to fold him in half. The other 2 missiles rain down at the remaining grunt, sundering his body and almost killing him. The grim harvest pulls the life essence from the fallen foe, regaining 2 points of the lost health to the necromancer, who then returns into the zone of obscurement. The summoned spirit descends to distract the nearest bandit and flutters back above the battlefield. The thug darts south to meet up and reinforce the last man standing, hoping for some strength in numbers. The moans of dying, heard just a moment ago, scared the red brand, who tries to hide, but he's clearly too shaken to do it well. He remains in his spot, relying on the cover. Avestrum laid waste to 2 people so far, and seriously wounded another. He's turning the battle in his favor, and will press the attack now. With the bird's intel, he runs out of the cloud northwest and lines himself up perfectly with the target at the very edge of his range. He thrusts his hands forwards after reciting the formula, shooting the ray at the ruffian, which causes long ice crystals to form on his dying, collapsing body. The animal companion keeps itself aloft and casts its gaze, looking for signs of life. The bandit's heavy breathing, erratic movement, and scraping against the stone give him away. The owl follows the noise and finds the remaining thug in distress, but the combat still rages on, so the familiar continues to harass the remaining red brand in hopes of stressing him out even more. The ruffian is aware where the magic came from, and in his desperation, he charges at the mage, but runs out of time to act upon his advancement. The wizard sees sees the fear in the enemy's eye and decides to play it safe by disengaging from his position and returning to the mist-covered road. The summoned spirit feigns another dive and swerves before it rams into the bandit, gaining back some altitude. The thug runs behind the boulder to the north and takes cover, but he cannot escape the animal companion's gaze. It's not over yet, but the player character decides to spend one of his first level spell slots to recover some strength, curing 7 hit points. He then moves further east, nearing the edge of the obscuring effect. The owl flies over and positions itself above the rock formation, keeping an eye on the last man standing, but refrains from engaging. The red-brand ruffian seems to be paralyzed with fear. He will attempt to flee the battle, but will he succeed? Will he alert the rest of the gang? Will the town remain a safe place for the necromancer to stay in? Will be revealed in the next episode of True Solo D&D. In the meantime, enjoy Conor Ragis's music, tell me what you thought about the fight, share the video around and subscribe to the channel for the advantage on perception checks to spot the next release.